believe it or not, I'm going to bring climate change into this discussion.
Okay.
Because it relates to everything.
Do you want to do it with Jane, or do you want to do it before we get Jane?
Yes,
Jane's
I do.
waiting.
Let's bring Jane on, because I don't want to keep her waiting. Otherwise, she won't be able to go and eat a chocolate Easter egg.
All right.
Easter bunny. I just saw it on the socials. Someone gave her an Easter bunny, I think.
Retirement Commissioner Jane Wrightson. Jane joins us right now. Morning, Jane.
Morena korua.
Very lovely to be with you. Well, it sounds like you and Radar are already connected through Twitter, so maybe I should just throw to him and step away. You guys have a relationship.
I'm not on Twitter. I could not be.
It was Facebook. I'm old school.
That's right. I'm old school. I'm too thin-skinned for Twitter.
Hey, curious then, Jane. Actually, when with the Retirement Commission, when you're communicating with, I guess, people, where are you communicating mostly from? There does the Retirement Commission? Have you got a TikTok? Are you talking to a lot of younger people, or are you aiming a lot of your social media output, through Facebook more than Twitter or Telegram, indeed, these days?
If you wanted to interview my comms person, you could do that, and should tell you.
Right.
The Retirement Commission is, largely speaking, focused on the journey to retirement, right? So it's a very long journey, and because it's the hardest saving to do and the hardest thing to think about, that's why we've got a job to do here. But it's fascinating stuff, and I've learned so much just being here in a couple of years. And it's like most things, many things in one's life. You go, oh, I wish I'd done that 20 years ago.
So you're more there to help people like me who are not at retirement get to retirement. You talked about financial savings, that kind of thing, as opposed to people who are already retired.
A bit of both. We've got a number of jobs to do under a couple of statutes. So partly I look after, or I have an advocacy role around pension policy. Because the reason my office was established was that in the 70s and 80s. Pension policy lurched about across various parties, right? So one party would bring in one thing, and then the next party would go, no, we'll do something else. And given that there are two things that need to happen in a country, you need to have a stable government policy, which then encourages private savings, and encourage private savings, it's got to be stable, right? Otherwise, you don't trust the system. So the government has a job to do in terms of how and where it pays the pension. And individuals have got a job to do in terms of thinking about the kind of lifestyle they want after they stop working, and preparing for that. And so for some people, the pension alone is it. And for other people, they decide that they can't live on that, and therefore that's when you have to start thinking about how you might provide for that. And it's really hard, I think, coming from the media sector. Yeah. Which is largely, it's a gig economy business, as you know. Very few people have had lifelong careers in it with nice salaries, apart from bureaucrats like me. And so even talking to people in my old sector has been illuminating, because they go, oh, well, I've never thought about it. And then you have to go, well, why not? Why not? If you have a long enough period, a bit of time to think about it a bit more deeply, then you might start doing something like, I don't know, joining KiwiSaver. And it's amazing how many self-employed people talk to me and go, oh, no, KiwiSaver's not for me, I'm not on a salary. And I go, why not? Pay yourself.
Oh, I feel like I've got to say, hi, my name is Radar, and
I don't.
KiwiSaver.
Join now, Radar, join now. Off you go.
Yeah. Oh, but then you've got to decide which KiwiSaver plan to go into, and I'll have.
That's easy. That's easy.
Talk to me about that.
Go on to the Sorted website, which is where you always start, and then go on to the Sorted KiwiSaver Fund Finder. And that will ask you a bunch of questions.
I've done a lot of stuff. Look, I've done a lot of stuff around KiwiSavers about, ethical KiwiSavers and where people invest their money and empowering their choice and all of that kind of thing. But hey, look, here's the thing that I think is really interesting in this conversation, and that for a long time, and I know this is where Pat is heading. I'm going to get in ahead. We had a fixed age. That is the age for everyone. This is when your retirement kicks in. But as we look at the stats and we become a little bit more aware of the diversity of people, we're looking now, and having a conversation with what Rawiri raised yesterday with the Maori Party around, well, hey, look, and this has been around for a while, Maori's life expectancy is not as long. They have drawn, I'm going to say, a genetic short straw, sociologically, economically. They don't live as long as other people. Should they be able to access retirement sooner? And then if we start to look at that, then do we also broaden it out and say, hey, look, there are other people as well. If for example, you look at people who have had a low socioeconomic, they've been within that group for a long period of time, I don't know whether the working poor is something that I can say. Pat will know, you will know. Statistically, if you're a part of that group as well, should we be more nuanced in where that retirement age and pension plans kick in? That's what we're going to be talking about, I think, Pat. Am I right?
Yeah, totally. And also, I also think about you've said a genetic short straw. I would just say if there are factors in someone's DNA that causes them to have a shorter lifespan no matter what. And not to compare groups, but for example, the average life expectancy, according to American figures, of someone with Down syndrome is 60 years. So the average life expectancy for someone with Down syndrome is they're never going to get to retirement. Is there a conversation in there to also be had? The flip side to that, not to kind of belabor the point of getting back to Jane, is I noticed that age concerned Rotorua manager Roy O'Rourke thinks that lowering the age is a good idea, but then said the potential problems could be encountered when proving, for example, this is specifically about Maori at 57, who is Maori, and asking the question, what percentage of Maori do you need to be to lower the rate? So there's
oh no, this is a can of worms, Jane.
Exactly. Jane, save us from our can of worms.
Right. I'll try, and a can of worms it is. Number one, it's a really good conversation to have, right? Because these things need to be talked about more. Number two, there's a difference between retirement and the pension. Getting the pension does not mean you retire necessarily. It just means you become eligible for, in effect, a universal benefit. And people will continue working and will need to continue to work. So there you go, if they can. The age thing is really interesting, right? It's fiendishly difficult to think of a system whereby different groups in the country would be eligible for a government pension at different ages. That would take a much bigger policy brain than mine, because all of those factors that you've just canvassed would come into play. But it is an absolute truth that Maori and Pacifica have shorter lifespans for systemic reasons. And so fewer of them get to pension age. So very good and, unpleasant little boil to keep lancing. I think that comes into play when governments start talking about putting the age up. The current government says it has no intention of doing so that's good. The age was 60 when I was a child, it's been 65 now for a couple of decades. Some parties believe that the age, and people believe that the age should go up to 67. I'm extremely cautious about that for those systemic reasons. And it is a government decision, right? So this is where people have a role to play in making their views known. And the question to ask is, if you agree that the age should go up, and there are many people who think it should, the question is why? And then the real question is, do you fully understand who it will hurt? Because there are three cohorts in this country who it will hurt, and that is Maori, Pacifica, and women. Pretty simple. And if you're a tradie still on the tools, you're not going to enjoy it either, because your body's about to fall apart.
Right.
So who it hurts is the much bigger question. And the other question is, if you do want to put the age up, why? Usually the answer is because we can't afford it. And then my question around that is, who says we can't afford it? And then you get the answer, well, it's a lot of money. Well, yes, it is. So's the health budget. So's the education budget. Yes, it is an awful lot of money. It's unsustainable. Well, is it? It's about government spending choices. And if, for instance, the country really was going broke and really couldn't afford it, and it's possible at some point, you need to also think of the other levers that you could use. And one of those is the perennial and deeply unpopular idea of means testing. There are other levers you could pull if you wanted to save the country some money. So that is the fiendishly difficult policy cauldron you have started to stir. And easy answers are simply not there. But people talking about it with a more informed basis is not a bad thing.
Yeah. All of this is predicated as well upon us becoming increasingly older on the whole. Whereas the new spanner in the works, if you look at, say, what happened in the States, is their average life expectancy because of COVID has actually dropped. So, we're in a fortunate position not have to think about that. But that's something to think about, I guess, as well. Is when we start to talk about this and say in 10 years' time or in 15 years' time, I guess that's something we would revisit at that point, should, unfortunately, something like that happen.
Oh, you mean things like if long COVID turned out to be a really big thing and we all had 10 years shaved off our life, well, then I think the country could afford it, yes.
Well, there's a silver lining in every cloud.
But part of the again, the policy cauldron is the increasing life expectancy of us all. And that's why thinking about your individual circumstances is so important, because for some people, crawling to pension age and getting super at 65, as I say, will be enough. And that will be particularly if you own your own home, because the pension is not predicated on having significant housing costs. And it may well be if you're living regionally or rurally and can be reasonably self-sufficient. You can scratch a living out of it, but you won't be comfortable.
I think
if you're going to live on the pension for 30 years and well into your 90s, think about how much your private savings have to stretch. And that radar, circling all the way back, is why you should be in KiwiSaver now and just hurry up.
I think
it all in property.
I think I heard a commentary on Today FM saying that 25% of people who are 50 to 65 right now are going to go into 65 retirement as renters. And the point was being made, and you can correct this or confirm this, Jane, that the pension is not set up for people necessarily who don't own their own house. In days gone by, you bought your house, you paid it off. By 65, it was freehold. The pension bought your food and paid your power. But if so many people are going into that age of life now as renters, how does that change the conversation around what the pension is and needs to be for those people?
Well, it's one of the arguments to say perhaps the amount of the pension should go up, and that's a whole nother grenade to lob into the policy cauldron, right? The pension is not designed to include significant housing costs, that's true. The traditional model is absolutely a mortgage-free house or a comfortable council flat that's affordable.
Right.
And both of those pillars are, as we know, under serious stress at the moment. So again, many pauses for thought here.
Yeah. Radar, up to you. Anything else?
Look, I said I was going to bring climate change into this because here's the thing. It does fit. I had the misfortune to have to give a couple of presentations on it, and I like to find the little things that people don't talk about. And one of the things was, if you are looking at increased temperatures, for those people who are working outdoors, now in rural New Zealand, a lot of Maori, Pacifica, are working outdoors. It's going to become increasingly strenuous, increasingly difficult to do that work. And again, that work expectancy lifetime will either shorten or become impossible to do as you get a little bit older, to stay on the tools, to still work outside. Do we, are we facing the need in the next few years to radically revisit the entire notion of this? We're talking about the fact that it wasn't designed for housing and renting, and that it wasn't designed for perhaps living as long as we are. Are these things being discussed? This notion of actually, we need to be a little bit more focused on the differences amongst people, as opposed to having this overarching concept of what a retirement savings plan is.
Boy, you don't ask the easy ones, do you?
No.
I think that brings it all the way back to purpose, right? So, and I can't talk about climate change in any great depth because I'm no expert, but if I'm thinking about the purpose of the retirement income system, and the retirement income system is twofold, as I said. In New Zealand, some areas some countries have three, but ours is private savings and government pension, right? Those are the two pillars.
What's the third? Sorry, What's the third?
Other countries have mandatory workplace schemes, of the old style. And that's why Australians, for instance, are so much better off in retirement. They have compulsory workplace savings schemes and voluntary and super. Their super's means tested and their age is 67. And people often say, oh, Australia's 67, so should we be? And I tend to say, well, they've got other benefits at play that we don't have. So be very careful when you say that. So the purpose of a retirement income system, I did some work on this when I got here, because I said, what's it all for? What's it all about? Which is what people new in jobs can always do and get away with. And there isn't really an answer to that. It's not in statute. It's not anywhere. So I pulled together a bit of a brains trust and said, let's try and work on a purpose statement for the system. And we have, and it's on our website, and it's a bit wordy and all that stuff, but its focus fundamentally is on dignity and mana in retirement, and things like, belonging to communities. And that's why these things are here, So if you're going to start digging deep into the whys in any world, including climate change, always go, what's the purpose? What are we trying to do here?
Yeah.
Jane, just to come back, as you did full circle on KiwiSaver before, to come right back to the original point we started this conversation with, which is the call for Maori to get retirement or pension at 57. I just want to be clear, because it sounds like what you were saying is that's something to consider if and when the age of the general population pension goes up. So, for example, maybe it would stay at 65 for Maori and go up to 67 for others. Is that what you're actually saying? To be, just so I can be completely clear on what your thoughts are around that, or are you saying that there is a possibility of investigating the idea of dropping the age?
I think it would be practically enormously difficult to have a graduated system. If somebody could work it out on a policy and practical way that is still based in equity, of course that would be a very interesting proposal. But I can't quite see it, not the least of which it will take the scab off the race scar again. How much Maori is Maori? All that stuff. And that would be unhelpful, I think, and divisive. And so I can't quite see how that would work. But the notion that Maori live less longer and are less likely to get the pension is a truth. And that, I think, is a useful concept to have in any debate around what the age should be and what the parameters are.
It sounds like what you're saying is there's a pool of people in New Zealand, and rather than moving forward, which will detrimentally impact those who are left furthest behind, we should at the very least stay where we are and give them more time to catch up. At
a minimum, I would think. But again, these are decisions of politicians, right? And so politicians need to be exposed to a range of views on this and a range of educated views. And I think hopefully that's one of the purposes of my office, that while I can advocate all I like, but we will provide facts and figures and data and informed opinions to go, if you want to go here, this will be the consequences, these will be the good things, and these will be the bad things. And things like pensions and retirement generally, there's a lot of hot air around it, not a lot of knowledge.
And not the least to mention as well, if we do stand still, per se, to allow people to catch up, the responsibilities that said politicians have to enable those people to catch up through policy and changes and encourage it through what they're making, not just to sit there idly wait for those people to catch up, whatever those people are in the situation. Politicians have a role to play to fix the problem as to why those people need to catch up, to allow them to catch up and to be actively involved in that conversation.
Yeah, and I think that could play out, if a government did decide to put the age up to 67 for all sorts of reasons that it might decide. There's a displacement effect to that, right? So that it doesn't mean that people between 65 and 67 won't get anything, because some of them will not be employable. Some of them will be ill. Some of them will be disabled, So the displacement effect comes back into the welfare system, if you like. And so have you really helped by making more people beneficiaries on the side by raising the age? Or would you just say that keeping it at 65 with the various inequities in that, there are people who don't need the money, but it's a right, so they claim it. Is that better than putting more people, weighting them more onto the welfare side of the equation.
Listen, we should let you go now. Retirement Commissioner Jane Wrightson, thanks for joining us. I appreciate your insights into this conversation overall, and hopefully that can of worms can stay open whilst we continue these chats for the forthcoming weeks, months, years, and who knows, maybe even decades.
My pleasure.